3:17 in the morning, and I was sitting on the floor of a hospital bathroom because the chairs in the waiting area felt too exposed. I don't know how to explain that. You'd think when your world is falling apart, you want to be around people. But there's a specific kind of grief that makes you want to fold yourself into the smallest possible space, somewhere with a locked door and no fluorescent light directly overhead. The bathroom had a single dim bulb and a paper towel dispenser that was already empty. I sat with my back against the cold tile wall, my phone in both hands, typing and deleting the same message over and over. My husband was in surgery. He had been in surgery for 4 hours. The car had hit the driver's side. I finally sent the message at 3:19 a.m. I sent it to the family group chat. His family, my family, all of us lumped together in a thread called the Gang Recage that usually only came alive for birthday gifts and forwarded news articles nobody asked for. Elliot is in emergency surgery. We're at St. Augustine's. I don't know anything yet. Please, pray. I watched the little check marks appear. Delivered. Then read receipts, one by one, as the message spread through the thread like a slow ripple. My mother-in-law read it at 3:21. My sister-in-law at 3:24. My own mother at 3:21. My sister-in-law at 3:31, which meant she'd woken up to the notification. My mother responded first. She sent a red heart emoji. I stared at it for a long time. Just the one emoji. Not, I'm on my way. Not, call me. Just a small red heart and then nothing. My sister-in-law sent, thinking of you both, with 2 exclamation points that made it feel like she was responding to news about a promotion. My mother-in-law, Constance, didn't respond at all that night. Not to the group chat, not to me directly. Nothing. By 5 a.m., I was still alone on that bathroom floor, and the surgeon had come out to tell me that Elliot had made it through, but that the next 48 hours were critical. I walked back to the waiting room by myself, sat down in one of those padded chairs that are somehow simultaneously hard and uncomfortable, and I pulled my knees to my chest, and I cried so quietly that the night shift receptionist probably couldn't hear me from 6 feet away. Nobody came. I want to be fair about what I mean by that. I know it was the middle of the night. I know St. Augustine's is 40 minutes from the suburb where most of his family lives. I know people have jobs and kids and reasons. But here's what I also know. If the situation were reversed, I would have been in that waiting room before the second hour was up. I would have driven in my pajamas. I would have driven in my pajamas. I would have brought terrible vending machine coffee and sat there without saying anything, because sometimes that's all you can do. Nobody came. Not that first night. Not the next morning. My own mother called me at 8 a.m., which I appreciated, but she was 3 states away and couldn't get a flight until the following week. She cried on the phone with me. That helped. In the strange way that someone else crying sometimes makes you feel less alone in your own. Constance called at 10 a.m. She asked how Elliot was doing. I told her he was stable but sedated. She said, unsure he'll be fine. He's always been so strong. Then she said she'd been up since 4 in the morning worrying, which, and I recognize this isn't charitable, felt a little bit like she was asking for credit for worrying from her own bedroom while I was sitting vigil alone in a hospital waiting room that smelled like industrial cleaner and stale crackers. She didn't come that day either. His brother, who lives 20 minutes from the hospital, texted me a gif of a candle with the word praying underneath it. That was it. That was the whole message. A gif. I stayed at that hospital for 11 days. Elliot came out of sedation on day 3. He had 3 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, a ruptured spleen that they'd had to remove, and some nerve damage in his left arm that the doctors said might improve with time and physical therapy. He was in tremendous pain, and he kept apologizing to me for scaring me, and I kept telling him to stop apologizing. And then I'd go into the hallway and lean my forehead against the wall for a few minutes before going back in. On day 4, Constance came. She arrived at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday with a casserole dish that the hospital staff wouldn't allow her to bring into the room because of food handling policies. So she stood in the hallway holding it with an expression like someone had personally wronged her. I went out to talk to her. She hugged me briefly. She told me I looked tired. I told her I was tired. She told me I should be eating better. I did not have the energy to respond to that. She stayed for 45 minutes. She talked to Elliot mostly about family news, a cousin's engagement, some drama at her church, light, surface-level things, the kind of conversation that fills space without touching anything real. Then she said she had a dinner commitment and she couldn't stay. Before she left, she stopped in the hallway and said something that I have been turning over in my mind ever since. She said, "I'm a little surprised you put all of that in the family group chat so late at night." You know how people worry. There might have been a gentler way to handle it. I didn't say anything. I genuinely could not find a single word. She patted my arm and left. I stood in that hallway for a solid 2 minutes before I could make my feet move again. A gentler way to handle it. My husband was in emergency surgery at 3 a.m. and there was supposed to be a gentler way to handle it. I called my best friend that night. We've known each other since college, and she's one of those people who will tell you the truth even when you don't ask for it. I told her what Constance had said. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "That's not a normal thing to say to someone whose husband almost died." She was right. I knew she was right, but I also kept second-guessing myself, the way you do when someone in a position of authority says something that doesn't make sense. You start to wonder if you're the one who's missing something. Elliot came home on day 11. He needed a hospital bed in the living room for the first 2 weeks because he couldn't do stairs. I slept on the couch so I could hear him if he needed anything. I was working from home. I'm a graphic designer, mostly remote, and I'd wake up at 6, answer emails for 2 hours, help Elliot with his morning routine, work through lunch, answer the door for pharmacy deliveries and physical therapy appointments, and fall asleep on the couch by 10 with my laptop still open. His family visited twice in those first 3 weeks. Once was Constance, who came for Sunday lunch and talked about her garden for 40 minutes, and then said she couldn't understand why our house was so cluttered, which was rich considering the living room currently contained a hospital bed, an IV stand, a blood pressure cuff, and 17 different prescription bottles. The second visit was his sister, who brought her kids and let them run around our house for 2 hours while Elliot tried to sleep, and I spent the entire time intercepting small children before they could crash into medical equipment. She meant well. I know she meant well, but I was so exhausted I could feel it in my teeth. My own family was different. My mother came for 10 days when she could get the flights sorted, and she was quietly, relentlessly useful. She did laundry and cooked things we could actually eat and gave me 4-hour windows where I could just sleep without listening for Elliot. I cried when she left. But here's where the story actually turns. It was about 6 weeks after the accident. Elliot was doing better, up to short walks, slowly regaining strength in his arm, which the doctors were cautiously optimistic about. I was starting to surface from survival mode, and then I got a call from Elliot's aunt. Now his aunt, Constance's sister, is a woman I have always found a little difficult to read. She's polished in the way that some women of a certain age and social class are polished, impeccably dressed, carefully worded, the kind of person who can say something pointed while maintaining a completely neutral expression. She and Constance have always been close. I had never been sure how she felt about me. She asked how Elliot was doing. I gave her the update. Then there was a pause, and she said, "I've been meaning to call you for a while. I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me rather than somewhere else." I sat down. She told me that in the days after the accident, Constance had been calling various family members, not to coordinate visits or to organize support, to explain why they shouldn't visit yet. According to the aunt, Constance had told several people, including Elliot's brother, his cousin, and at least 2 family friends, that I was not handling things well, that I was overwhelmed and emotional, and that having visitors at the hospital would make things harder for me. She told people I had specifically asked for space, that I needed time to process privately. She had said versions of this to at least 6 different people. None of it was true. I had never asked for space. I had never said anything remotely like that. I was sitting alone in a hospital waiting room for 11 days, asking the ceiling why nobody was coming. The aunt said she'd believed it. At first, most of them had. Why would you question it? Constance was Elliot's mother. She was the one with the closest connection. If she said I needed space, you'd believe her. But then the aunt had run into Elliot's physical therapist's receptionist. Small world. They go to the same church. And the receptionist had mentioned offhandedly that she felt so bad for Elliot's wife who was there alone every single day. That's when the aunt started to question things. She had called Elliot's brother, then his cousin, then a family friend. She started connecting dots. I was shaking by the time she finished talking. Not from anger exactly. It was more like the specific nauseating feeling of realizing that something you experienced as random abandonment was actually, in some sense, orchestrated. I thanked her. I told her I needed to think. I didn't tell Elliot right away. He was still in recovery, still dealing with pain and frustration about his arm, still not sleeping well. I sat on that information for 4 days, which was one of the harder things I've ever done. Sitting across from your husband at dinner, knowing something major and not saying it. On the 5th day, I told him. We were on the back porch in the evening, the first time we'd really been able to sit outside together in weeks. I told him everything his aunt had told me. I tried to be factual about it. I was not entirely successful at being factual about it. Elliot was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I need to talk to my mother. I told him I thought that was the right call, but that I wanted to be there. He agreed. We asked Constance to come over for dinner the following Saturday. She arrived with a bottle of wine and seemed pleased to be invited, which felt surreal given the context. We sat down, we had dinner. And then Elliot put down his fork and said, Mom, I need to ask you something directly. He told her what his aunt had shared. He didn't soften it. He didn't frame it as a misunderstanding or rumor. He laid it out plainly. These are the things you reportedly told these people. This is why none of them came. This is what my wife experienced during those 11 days. Constance's first response was to look at me, not with guilt, with something closer to calculation. She said she had been trying to protect the family from unnecessary stress, that she knew Elliot was going to be fine, and she didn't want people to panic, that she thought she was managing the situation. Elliot asked her why she hadn't talked to me before, telling people I needed space. She said she didn't want to burden me. Elliot said, you didn't want to burden her, so instead you let her sit alone in a hospital for 11 days. Constance said that wasn't how she'd thought about it. I said very quietly, how did you think about it? She didn't answer that. What followed was about 40 minutes of conversation that I won't detail completely, because parts of it were painful in ways that still feel too raw. But the shape of it was this. Constance had decided on her own, without consulting anyone, that she was the appropriate person to manage the family's response to the crisis. She had appointed herself the gatekeeper. She had decided what information people needed and how much stress they could handle, and what my limits were, without ever asking me. The closest she came to acknowledging harm was saying, I can see how this might have felt isolating. Might have felt like it was a matter of interpretation. Elliot told her that she owed me an actual apology, not a managed one. She said she was sorry I felt that way. I think we all know there's a specific kind of non-apology that's somehow worse than no apology at all. I'm sorry you feel that way is the verbal equivalent of a door closing in your face while someone smiles at you through the window. We ended the dinner early. In the weeks after that, Elliot reached out to his brother and his cousin and the family friend. He explained what had happened. His brother, to his credit, called me directly and apologized. A real one, the kind where someone says I should have called you myself. I should have shown up. I had no reason to just take someone else's word for it. That apology meant something. I told him so. His cousin sent a card. His cousin's wife sent a meal delivery gift card with a note that said she'd been thinking about us. Small things, but they counted. What happened with Constance was more complicated. She called me about 2 weeks after the dinner. She said she wanted to start fresh. She said she had a check she wanted to give us. A recovery gift, she called it, to help with the medical bills and the time I'd taken off work to take care of Elliot. She named a number. It was generous. Genuinely generous. I told her I appreciated the thought. Then I told her I couldn't accept it. She was quiet on the other end of the line. I said, I think accepting that would let us both pretend the conversation is finished when it isn't. I don't think we've actually gotten to the bottom of why you felt you had the right to make those decisions on my behalf. And until we do, I don't think money is the right path forward. She said she didn't understand what more I wanted from her. I said I didn't want anything from her right now. I said I needed time. That was 3 months ago. Elliot and I have talked about it a lot since then. He's been in his own complicated process. This is his mother, and I've tried to hold space for how hard that is, even when what she did still makes my chest feel tight when I think about it. He loves her. It's not simple. It never is. What I've come to understand, slowly and imperfectly, is that Constance didn't do what she did out of malice exactly. I don't think she sat down and thought, I'm going to make sure no one visits my daughter-in-law in the hospital. I think she told herself she was handling things, managing, being useful in the way she knows how to be useful, which is controlling information and shaping perception. But the impact was the same. I was alone in a hospital for 11 days while my husband fought to stabilize. I slept on a waiting room chair. I ate crackers from a vending machine. I watched every notification on my phone and tried to understand why, in a family of 14 adults, not one of them had gotten in a car. Now I know, and I'm still figuring out what to do with knowing. Elliot's arm is getting better. His physical therapist says he might have close to full range of motion back by next year, which is better than the initial estimate. He still gets tired quickly. He still has days where the pain is more than the medication fully covers. But he's here, and I am profoundly grateful for that in a way that rewired something in me permanently. We've had some long conversations about the future, about what we want our family to look like, about who gets access to our hard days, about what it means to show up for someone. Those conversations have been some of the most honest we've ever had. I've learned something that I think I might have always known but never had to test until now. Crisis is not a disruption to real relationships. It's a clarifier. It strips away the performance of closeness and shows you what's actually underneath. Some people in our lives surprised me. Elliot's brothers surprised me. My neighbor, who barely knows us, who I'd shared maybe 6 conversations with before all of this, showed up twice a week for 3 weeks with food and never once asked to come inside or expected anything from me. She'd just leave it at the door with a small note. Those notes are still in my kitchen drawer. Some people disappointed me in ways I'm still adjusting to. And some people showed me exactly who they are, without ambiguity, in a way I'll probably never be able to unsee. I don't know yet what my relationship with Constance looks like going forward. I know it's different. I know that I will never again be in a room with her and assume that the surface of things reflects what's underneath. I know I'll be more careful. I know Elliot is in his own process of grief about that, because it is a grief of realizing a parent is capable of something you didn't think they were capable of. But I also know this. There's a version of this story where I never found out, where I just believed that life is busy and people are imperfect and nobody came because that's just what happens sometimes. I would have quietly recalibrated my expectations. I would have absorbed the isolation as something I just had to accept. I'm glad I know, even though it's harder. And I'm glad Elliot is here on our back porch in the evening, getting stronger. That's the part I keep coming back to when everything else feels too tangled. He's here. We're here. That has to be enough to start from. I've been sitting with this story for 3 months now, and the part that still catches me off guard isn't the anger. The anger made sense. It arrived quickly, burned hot, and I knew what to do with it, more or less. What I wasn't prepared for was the grief that came underneath it. The quieter, slower realization that some people will always choose management over presence, and that you can love someone and live alongside them for years and still not know that about them until the moment everything breaks open. Constance didn't set out to hurt me. I've made my peace with that partially. She set out to control something that frightened her, and she used the tools she'd probably been using her whole life: information, perception, the careful shaping of what other people know and feel. It worked for a while. It works until it doesn't. And then what you're left with isn't just the original crisis. You're left with the weight of what the cover-up cost, which in my case was 11 days alone in a hospital waiting room, wondering what I had done to make my family stop caring. That's the part that took the longest to untangle, separating what was real from what was constructed. I had absorbed the abandonment as fact. I had started to believe on some cellular level that I was someone people didn't show up for. That's what prolonged isolation does. It doesn't just make you lonely. It makes you rewrite your own story in the loneliest possible direction. What I know now is that the truth always has a way of surfacing, not through dramatic confrontation or perfect timing, but through the small, ordinary cracks that a constructed version of events can never fully seal. A receptionist at a church. A comment made offhand. Someone who knew someone who had noticed. The aunt made the call she made because something felt off to her, and she trusted that feeling enough to investigate it. That decision changed everything for me. I think about her choice a lot, how easy it would have been to let it go, to tell herself it wasn't her business, to assume Constance must have had her reasons. She didn't do that. She decided that the truth mattered more than the piece of pretending. I want to be that kind of person. I want to be someone who, when something feels wrong, asks the next question instead of letting it settle into comfortable silence. Elliot and I are different now in ways I'm still learning to map. We talk more carefully. We've had to have conversations about loyalty and honesty and what it means when the people who raised you turn out to be more complicated than the version of them you grew up believing in. Those conversations are not easy. But I'd rather have them than live inside a story that was never true. What I keep returning to is this: the people who showed up, really showed up, did so quietly, without announcement, without expecting anything back. My neighbor and her notes. Elliot's brother and his real apology. My mother and her 4-hour windows of sleep. They didn't make a performance of caring. They just did the next useful thing. That's what I want to remember, not the waiting room, not the 11 days, not the non-apology across a dinner table. The notes in my kitchen drawer. That's the version of this story I'm choosing to carry forward.